Welcome to this episode of the Ad Project Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Maarja Hewitt.
And I'm Joe Scheller, and also a host.
That felt good.
that sounded good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was nice to offload that weight off my shoulders.
Heavy on you, that intro each time?
Yes.
You can't remember.
Yeah. Well, then it's always like, what do you do right after that?
Yeah.
Like I'd have my follow-up question with Matt and be like, how are you doing? And then
he would say...
He would just get stumped.
Yeah.
Yeah, ask any detailed question, and then that one, it just take him back.
Yeah. And so you need to ask him, what's your favorite AMC insight and why?
He'll talk 20 minutes. Yeah. How are you doing?
Hard. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was a weird...
No, it's a weird response, but...
Glad. Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad we're concerned about my well-being.
So today's episode, just to keep you going here, we're talking about retail media networks and how they're booming, but also kind of breaking at the same time. We're kind of in a growing pain of the retail media network boom.
Yes, we definitely are. And even how you define retail media is debatable and where you go. So we'll talk through all the different ways that you can use retail data. Everybody has been getting super excited about retail media. All the retailers want to get in on the gold rush. As retailers look at this, they say, okay, I get, minimal margins. Like Walmart gets 3 to 4% in store. But if I can use that customer data, I look at the advertising side and the margins are great and profits are really booming. And if I look at someone like Amazon, I see that advertising is a major profit driver. We need to get in on this. And so there's been this huge push for all retailers to get into the retail media story, develop their own retail media networks. And now they're finding that there's definitely some hurdles. So what we want to talk through is the space as a whole. And then kind of the evolution, and then some of these roadblocks we're seeing. And then I've got some decently strong opinions on some different things that need to be fixed for this to really keep growing outside of some of the major players. But yeah, lots to talk about.
Lots to talk about, yeah. And, I think we all know the major players. Amazon, of course. Walmart's definitely a clear second. But then you have a lot of these kind of retailers who are making claims, that are making gains and taking more of the pie and getting more robust and dropping new features, things like that. So you have Target, you have Instacart, Kroger, Home Depot, Petco and Chewy are big in the pet space. Sam's Club and Costco, of course, have a member model retail media network, so they're a little different, but also claiming space. And
CVS, Walgreens,
Sephora, Ulta. You have kind of these niche category retailers, and globally there's 250 retail media networks now. So you have those major players and those others who are rising, but then you have 200 others that are also trying to grab a piece of that pie.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun to talk through how we got here, because this customer data has existed for quite a while. And so it's why this big rush now? There's been a couple fundamental things that have changed in the industry. So one is Amazon has pioneered this model. So Google pioneered search ads, and it grew into this huge advertising budgets that are going to it. For Amazon, they started out with sponsored ads and starting to throw some ads within the search results. Saw that growing significantly, and just, on the heels of all the traffic and everything else that Amazon had done to build up a brand, it became a go-to for different sellers like myself when I was selling, a decade ago, and getting into the space. And it was in the very early stages, keyword targeted, and not much controls. When I started, there was no product targeting. Negatives weren't around. It was in the very basic stages. But sellers and brands started to see some major benefits from it. So it drove more investment. And then Amazon started to really build out their different ad types, and we got sponsored brands, and then we got sponsored display, and then this whole Amazon DSP thing got rolled in, and now we've got AMC and all these tools to tie it together. So that all being said, Amazon has laid down this really solid groundwork, and all the different retailers are looking at Amazon and saying, okay, I want that. Another fundamental shift that we've seen within the digital advertising landscape as a whole is just the focus on privacy. And so it's a lot harder to track people throughout the web with third-party cookies than it was a decade ago. And so third-party cookies, they would just put this identifier within your browser. And then as I go to different websites, the websites can see this identifier. They can tie it to me. They can know that Joe Shellerud went to this outdoors website and then looked at this travel blog and then went over here and was also interested in hiking stuff. So it's like, okay, we should advertise like hiking and camping gear for Joe. Now with the focus on privacy, a lot of browsers are rolling back what you can track. The cookie is going to crumble and then it's not. And so it's going to be depreciated and now it's not.
That was the biggest whiplash.
Yeah.
The industry.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
Back and forth. But you're seeing different browsers, like more privacy focused browsers, like, Safari or Firefox or different ones like that. You can't, like, cookie tracking's not working the way that it used to. And so there's been this big shift from all these third-party data aggregators. And then the key question for the advertising industry is like, well, how do we get good audience data? Because we want to show our ads to people who are actually going to be interested. And that's where this focus on first-party data has really come into play. And so everybody's shifted their focus to those folks that have the first-party data. And one big one is retailers. So who knows you better than the people that you're buying from and what you're actually buying? I can get indicators on what I'm searching or what I'm viewing, but what I'm buying is a much stronger signal in what I'm interested in than what I'm browsing on social media or doing a Google search on. And so there's a huge potential benefit for advertisers from all this first-party data. And that's the basis for retail media networks and why we're seeing this gold rush come in.
And to be fair, it's not just retailers, too, with this first-party data. Like, if you look at an even higher level of the first-party data, there's this thing called commerce media.
Yes.
And so you have retail media networks that are part of that. That's retailer first-party data. But then there's also industries who also are getting into it and realizing they have first-party data and can create these media networks. So you have financial media networks like Klarna or credit card companies. And you have travel media networks, so like Marriott, Bonvoy, Expedia, travel-oriented businesses that have first-party data and are creating media networks. So retail media networks are definitely the biggest segment of that so far.
Yep.
But you see it expanding in industries beyond just retailers.
I was at a conference and I was talking to some marketers from a big fitness company, and they're looking to sell their membership data as a audience that you could utilize. And so there's another audience that you could target. And so the potential is there. And the business case is definitely there. And so where I think this all starts to fall apart is in the execution side. So maybe we can go to that next.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one that I see a lot is the siloed platforms. And so we specialize on the retail media side. And it's hard for us, even specializing in it, to be able to know and keep up with all the nuances of all these different networks. And so as a brand, I have a specific amount of advertising budget that I need to put in place. And so I can get really deep and detailed on certain channels, or I can get really broad but not as detailed on others and try to hit everything. One of the key issues is with these siloed platforms, every platform operates differently. And just from a focus standpoint, trying to figure out where to allocate the spend, it gets very tricky very quickly. And what we find is that the majority of brands, and we definitely agree with this, would prefer, let's have a focused efforts on certain channels that are going to drive the biggest results, instead of just spreading our budget, not being able to get as deep on numerous different channels.
Because how do you scale then if you're spread thin?
Yeah.
And trying to keep track of all the different networks and what your performance looks like there and what ad types are needed where.
Yeah. It just gets so tricky. And a lot of these different networks are in different levels of development. So the capabilities that are available on one is not available on the other. How you implement it is available. It's different between the different channels. Getting it into another key piece, like how things are measured is so different between the channels. And so even if I have perfect visibility for these different channels, the way that like a sale is attributed, or I'm trying to allocate spend into these different buckets or targeting methods or ad types or whatever it is, like how things are measured, especially how sales are attributed, very significantly between the different channels. So even if we have perfect visibility on the metrics between these different channels, I still can't go back to a brand and say, okay, it's not as easy to say, okay, we're getting a better return here, allocate more budget there. Because we have to look at the nuances and how things are measured.
Attributed. And...
Yep, this one has a 7-day attribution window. This one has 14. This one may take into account Halo sales. This one ties in brick and mortar. This one doesn't. It's not apples to apples. And so it makes making these decisions on budget allocation and media mix very tricky. So another key beef that we have is there needs to be a standardization on how different metrics are measured and reported on throughout the retail media industry. Because until we can compare apples to apples and know that it's the same thing between the two, without having to dig into the details, a lot of these smaller networks are just going to get ignored because we're not going to spend the time to dig into them. We're just going to focus on some of the bigger drivers.
So really the lack of standardization. Tricky.
It's a good one.
The lack of that is twofold because it's the platform itself, like the names of things like ad console, ad center, just how things are set up. But then you look deeper and it's the data itself and how things are measured. So, there's kind of two barriers of like being able to fully understand and trust comparing performance of different retail media networks.
Yeah, even if I could say there weren't all the hurdles of having to get into these different retail networks and then set up the accounts and then allocate budget and set up the campaigns and figure out the targeting types and figure out all the nuances, even if that didn't even exist. Now, with the results I get, can I accurately compare between the different channels, or do I also have to make modifications or have these big asterisks? Yeah, we're sure. Yeah, okay. That didn't sound right, but yeah, on like how this is actually measured. Without that, it makes it so tricky. And then you just layer on top all the differences in terms of optimization and campaign setup and everything, and it makes it a huge hurdle to get into some of these smaller networks where you're not going to have the budget to justify the time and the effort.
Laying this all out makes me very anxious for brand like e-com folks, like having to navigate this explosion of options.
Sure.
And then really understand like how do you most efficiently allocate your budget?
Yeah.
Where do you put what where?
I mean, most people will default to like, hey, if I get overwhelmed, I'm going to stick with the status quo.
Yeah. And
then the status quo is the bigger networks. And so that's what we're seeing is if you look at budget allocation between the different networks, it's retail media networks. It's the majority Amazon. Then Walmart is number two, taking up a much smaller portion of the pie, but still like big enough to be seen. And then you have the other like 5%. And that's every other retail network competing for that 5%. And so if you look at a sliver of the 5%, there's not much budget there to fight over, and the incentive to get through some of these key hurdles makes it much less compelling to dig into it.
So what do you think those smaller retail media networks will do over the next few years? Will they realize they don't have the infrastructure or the scale or the numbers to be able to support a retail media network, or do they join a tech platform where things are brought together?
Yeah, I think there definitely needs to be consolidation in the space. And so for me, one big hurdle to get over is if I can get more retail media networks within a single console that I know that I have the same optimization controls, I have the same campaign setup controls, and I have the same measurement, then it makes it really easy to allocate some extra budget. Like, okay, I want to spend a little bit on Chewy and Target. All right, I just allocate the budgets. I can set everything up same way. Like, life is good. It's once I get to start going through all these different consoles and working through all these different hurdles that we just said, it makes it much more burdensome. So I think a consolidation within some single consoles.
So like more Criteos of the world?
Potentially more Criteos, or like Amazon's making a push right now too to bring more retailers within their console. And I understand the hurdle when other retailers are looking at this and they're like, okay, I'm not going to join my major competitor that continues to take market share. Amazon is working to make sure there's those safe walls in between for data sharing, so they only have access to what, like the console has access to what it needs, but it's not shared with Amazon. That's where I think a lot of these retailers are going to have to join a console like Amazon, because the majority of retail media advertisers are already in Amazon. And so if I can allocate extra budget to other channels through that, yep, Amazon will take a little cut, but this is network effects in action. This is where I'm not going to join 20 social media platforms to try to connect with 20 different friends. We're all going to go into a single platform because everybody's already there.
And that, just for reference, is the Amazon ad retail service that you're referencing? Yeah.
Yep. And so, yeah, hopefully they're able to gain some more retailers there, or there's a consolidation for another independent spot. So a Criteo could be a case where they keep going. And I don't know. I mean, you see many that join Criteo. You see others like Home Depot that start their own retail media network. They do have more control. They're not having to pay those fees, but you lose the network effects and you have these major hurdles to get in. So I'm hoping for a major consolidation within the industry, where you have a single console, a single measurement, single optimization. I think that's going to expand the budgets going to these other networks quite a bit.
Would consolidation solve the measurement issue across retailers?
I think the console would have to.
It maybe depends on who. Yeah.
Yep. Because you have to have the right data coming in from these different networks too. And so that'll be a key hurdle.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be key to growing these budgets. And so I think these retailers are starting to realize this now. The gold rush was there. Now we're set up. We have our retail media network, but no budgets are flowing, and we're trying to figure out why. It's not because your data isn't valuable. It's because there's so many hurdles to get set up for the budget that I would allocate for that data set.
Is there a scenario where, maybe there's overarching measurement standards that are set? Like, I think IAB is working toward that, where these measurement standards are set, and that's kind of the industry expectation. Is there a scenario where then retail media networks can stay separate and not consolidate?
I think so. Then it's the campaign setup and the optimization. There's still hurdles there, but they could follow the same playbook and try to make it as standard as possible. So there's still a new console, new registration, everything else. So there's going to be some bigger hurdles. So unless you're a bigger retail player, like I wouldn't go that route. And you have the development costs and everything on top of that. So I just join another network, get the network effects. So I think it helps on the measurement side, but there's still a lot of hurdles there too. And we've experienced that. Just even getting signed up for some of these retail media networks is so much more complicated than it needs to be. And this is what we do. And we have big spenders. Like I can't imagine being a brand trying to navigate this landscape.
What's the timeline for changes? Because I do feel like we're kind of at this, like we're on the precipice. Like we've boomed.
Yeah.
And now we have to figure out how it all works well.
Yeah. Some of these retail networks will go away. They're going to realize that there's not enough budget there and the investment just kind of had to go away. The other ones are going to have to pivot and figure out how they're going to get more dollars flowing to them. And it's not just going to be on the data or the audience side. I think it's going to push them in that direction. So I would expect that different retail networks go away, or they start to consolidate in. Without that, I just see them all fighting over 5% of the pie. And you're going to have some niche cases where people are going to take the time to learn these different ones. And if they can, they're going to have a huge advantage if they have enough budget to allocate where it actually matters. And so there's a lot of ifs there. So you could find niche cases where there's going to be budgets flowing. But I think over the next couple of years, it's really going to push for this consolidation and more standard measurement. Because if they don't have that, they're just not going to see advertisers taking the time to spend.
Could be a long road ahead.
Could be a long road ahead. Yep.
In the meantime, advertisers, what do they focus on? Some core retail media networks.
You focus on the core ones.
For them.
Exactly. Yeah. Focus on the core ones. Focus on the bigger ones. You're going to have better measurement. You're going to have more control. I would take a narrower approach where you can get deeper and allocate that budget. And then you can start testing some one-offs as you go. But 80-20 rule, 90-10, 95-5, focus on the big ones right now. That's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Yes, it could be interesting to get into some of these niche players and be one of the only ones there. Only makes sense if you're really cranking out the budgets for it, though. So, yeah, I don't know. Lots of opportunity. Amazon's paved the way. Yeah. Other players like Walmart are making huge gains, so it's been fun to see. So we're in a space that's grown. There's a ton of opportunity, so lots to come.
Plenty you can do now, but time will tell for what it's going to look like. This landscape will all change in 2-3 years.
It'll change. Yeah, but it's fun. Yeah. It's fun.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe. You can find our podcast on our YouTube, Apple, Spotify, our website, really wherever you listen. So be sure to follow along, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.